we'll start with the tour. I think what we'll do is we're going to look at the tour and the Shulchan Aruch, and I also thought it might be an opportunity to look at the Mishnah Brura and the Aruch HaShulchan. And one of the reasons I want to do that is just to, I mean, I think we've done a little bit of that before. I wanted to maybe highlight some of the differences in the way the Mishnah Brura was written as opposed to the way the Aruch HaShulchan was written, which I find really fascinating. They were written around the same time, like during the same years, but the approach to the way halacha is paskined and written down is very different. But so we'll start though with the tour, and we've done the tour before also. The tour, just to remind us, so the tour is the son of the Rosh, and second. So yes, he was born in Germany around 1269, and he died in Spain around 1343. And we discussed this before, that the Rosh was one of the outstanding Talmidim of the Maran Rutenberg, and the Rosh fled essentially from Germany to Spain. And then, so his son, of course, his family went with him, and the tour continued there. So the tour is a summary of halacha l'maaseh. It's also, we talk about the tour. We're talking about the four turim, the four sections, which then come to be the same four sections that that Yosef Karo uses to write the Shulchan Aruch. He bases the Shulchan Aruch on this. And there were a number of Hirushim that were written on the tour, but the most famous of them came to be the Beit Yosef of Yosef Karo. I don't think we're going to do so much of the Beit Yosef on this Siman. We may come back and do some of it. But I think for now, just to get, let's give ourselves a summary of a lot of what we've done until now. So let's look at the tour. Achila didnan, the achila that we've learned in the Mishnah, ha'ochel kikotavet hagasa b'yom kippurim chayav, that somebody, I'm sorry, actually, the way you should read this is Achila Nekudatayim, colons. The tour here is, I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit out of it. The tour is building on what he wrote about previously about Yom Kippur. And he explains that there are, in the previous Siman, he explains what the Inuyim are, right? So this is the previous Siman Tafresh Yud Aleph, Kol Hadvarim Hasurim Bi'ikar Hayom, Hasurim Gam B'Layla, all the things that are forbidden during the main part of the day, in other words, the daylight hours, are forbidden also at night. Umahen, what are they? Mahen Hadvarim Hasurim, what are the forbidden things? Malacha, Achila V'Shtiyah, Rechitza V'Sicha, Nilata Sanda V'Tashmish HaMitah. Kulhu nafkalan mikrai. We learn all of them out from Psukim. Mihu, nonetheless, in chiyuv karet ela b'mlacha v'achila b'shtiyah. There's no chiyuv karet except for doing work, for doing mlacha, for eating and drinking, Ava b'hana chen v'hen karet, but with the other ones, there's no karet, right? And this is, of course, according, we saw this in the Gemara, this is obvious in the Gemara. Even though we learn them from Psukim, asmachta ba'alma nidbu. The other ones are just in us. The psukim that we use for the other inuyim are just asmachta ba'al. Yeah, so this is we'll read this. It's a quick summary. Malacha ketzad. So, how is malacha asur on Yom Kippur? Kol malacha shechayivin ala b'Shabbat chayivin ala b'Yom Kippurim. All the malachot you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do on Yom Kippur. V'chol sheb'Shabbat patur alo asur gam kein hu b'Yom Kippurim. Anything on Shabbat that you're forbidden to do, even though you're exempt from punishment, so that's also true in Yom Kippur. Ella, Shabbats don't know skila, Yom Kippurims don't know karet. The only difference is that if you do melacha on Shabbat b'mezid, purposely, intentionally, then you're chayav skila, stoning. Yom Kippurims don't know karet. And Yom Kippur, if you do the same melacha, there is no mitat beit din, right? Beit din doesn't mete out a punishment to you, but you're chayav karet. B'chuli sureh hotzat Shabbat, carrying on Shabbat, nohagin gam ken b'Yom Kippurim. Same thing on Yom Kippur. That's also the same as Shabbat. V'chol davar shasur l'taltalo b'Shabbat. In other words, the dinim of muktzah that apply on Shabbos apply on Yom Kippur. Ella shebezehi kilubo shehitirubo knivat yerek min hamincha lamala. So this is something we saw some time ago. There was a special heter that was given on Yom Kippur to trim vegetables from the time of Mincha and onwards on Yom Kippur. Perush, and what does that mean? Hasir mimeno alav hamulvashim. It's like to remove the rotting leaves on certain vegetables, to prepare them for eating. And similarly, you're allowed to start cracking nuts from the time of Mincha and onwards. You can break them open to prepare them to eat after Yom Kippur. This halacha of preparing vegetables or nuts on Yom Kippur, that's when Yom Kippur falls out on Chol, aval b'Shabbat asur. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to do it. In other words, they were mekil on Yom Kippur that falls out on Chol to start preparing food on Yom Kippur for Motzei Yom Kippur. But they didn't go so far as to allow you to prepare from Shabbos to Chol. To prepare your food for Motzei Yom Kippur. And the truth is, nowadays, our minhag is also to forbid that. In other words, nowadays, halacha l'maisa is that we don't do this. We don't actually prepare food on Yom Kippur for Motzei Yom Kippur. The original heter we saw in the Gemara, it was like to help people get through the rest of the day. It was like there's a psychological benefit to being able to prepare your food, but we don't actually do this. So here he mentions all the things that are asur on Yom Kippur. And so now when we come to Tafresh Yud Bet, over the next few simanim, he's going to go through each one of the inuyim. So the first thing that he's going to address is achila. Right? So he's not going to go through melacha because basically he said in Tafresh Yud Aleph, for all intents and purposes, you can just refer back to Hilchot Shabbat for melacha, because everything that he described already in Hilchot Shabbat is going to be applicable on Yom Kippur. But the inuyim are particular to Yom Kippur. So he's going to describe each one of them here. So achila didnan. Achila, we learn that in the Mishnah, ha'ochel kekotevet hagasa b'yom kippurim chayav u'pachod michbetza. If you eat the size of a fat date on Yom Kippur, you're chayav, and that's less than a kibetza. The ein chiluk ben gadol katan. So when Rishonim, I think we saw this a little bit. Rishonim discuss how big the kotevet hakasa is. It ends up, the Rambam says it's a little bit less than a kibetza. And we're still actually going to see that. We didn't do that all the way into the Gemara. It'll be a little bit later on in the Gemara that we're in the middle of. Vein chiluk ben gadol katan. There's no difference between a big person or a small person. Kulam shiuram kikotevet. In other words, he's laying that out, that the shiur of the kikotevet is a fixed shiur, regardless of the size of the person who's eating it. And that we know is in contrast to drinking, where drinking is relative, right?
Yeah, it's a cheekful.
It's a cheekful, right? So it's relative. So he wants to lay out right away that kikotevet is a fixed shiur. It doesn't matter if you're big or small. It doesn't matter whether you're eating things that you're allowed to eat normally when it's not Yom Kippur, or things you're not allowed to eat. Right, all these things that in any event you're not allowed to eat. It doesn't matter whether you eat something that you're allowed to eat or not allowed to eat in other circumstances or on other days. They're all asur to eat on Yom Kippur. All the ochlin combine to a shiur. So the simple understanding of that, which we've also discussed, is, if you have I'm looking at the things I was given yesterday, right? So you have like a cookie, and then you have hamantash, and then you have some potato chips or a banana. They're all mitzaref to a shiur. You don't have to eat a shiur of one single type of food. But I remember if we discussed it, melach shal basar, even salt that is on meat, v'tzir shal hayerek. The Mishnah discusses the tzir. The tzir, like the brine, or right, that would be on a vegetable, like a cooked vegetable, mitzdarefim o lahashlim l'chashiur. Aval ochin u'mashkin ein mitzdarfim. All right, so in other words, the idea is that, so like when you cook meat, for example, right, so let's say you add salt, or maybe you put on some soy sauce or whatever it is. So you don't eat salt. So you might think that it's not mitzaref to the shiur, but it is, because it's something that you eat with the meat. You eat it along with the meat, so it has the same din. And for our purposes, the din here that we're concerned about is the shiur, how much you're eating. So it does combine to make a shiur of whatever it is you're eating. The shiur, the ochin umashkin en mitzarfin. Right? If you eat less than a shiur and you drink less than a shiur, you don't combine those volumetric measurements to make a single shiur, either of achila or of shtiya. V'shiur l'tzaref shtei achilot hu kedei achilat pras, shehu arba betzim. And the amount, so then the amount that you put together, in other words, right? Because the idea is that we don't assume that you're going to gulp down one shiur of food. You're not going to stick a kotevet hakasa in your throat and swallow it down. You're going to eat it the way you normally eat. And so, how much during over what space of time is your eating considered to be itself mitzdaref So that's Kedei Achilat Pras. It's the time it takes to eat a pras. And a pras is 4 beitzim. This is, I believe we touched on this some time ago. This is a machloket. Rishonim, Rashi holds it's 4 beitzim. And the Rambam holds it's 3 beitzim. And of course, again, it's not that it's the time it would take to eat that amount of beitzim, right? Like that shiur of food. So even though kekotevet hakasa is much less than 3 or 4 beitzim, but if you were to eat continuously that amount, that's called kedei achilat pras, right? It's the time it takes to eat achilat pras, and that's a certain amount of time. And I think a long time ago we looked at some of the different dayot on that, and I think it ranges from I think as little as like 3 minutes to as much as 9 minutes. And I think the Aruch HaShulchan says he also doesn't give it an exact fixed amount of time. And we'll look at the Aruch HaShulchan later. But I think he says it's about 5 minutes or so, 5 to 7 minutes. Okay. Katav harambam zichrono livracha she'im yesh mitchilat achila rishona ad sof achila achrona kedei achilat pras mitzdarfot v'in lav ve'en mitzdarfot. So the Rambam clarifies it means that from the time you started eating whenever you started eating the first thing that you ate, until you finished eating the last thing you ate, if that amount of time passes, then whatever food you ate during that time is mitzdaref. And if not, then it's not mitzdaref. If you ate food that's not fit to eat, or if you ate an excessive amount of food, meaning, in other words, if you ate after you already were sated, after you were already full, and you kept eating even after that. And how would that happen on Yom Kippur? For example, let's say you had a big meal on Erev Yom Kippur, which you ate beheter, and then you were stuffed, and then Yom Kippurim started, and while you're still in this state of being stuffed, you kept eating. Technically, you're patur for that eating, because it's no longer considered to be a regular achila. It's in the same category as eating food that's not fit to eat. And food that's not fit to eat, we discussed that also, and we'll come back to some other examples. Achal alei kanim, ululei g'panim, sheliv levu kodem Rosh Hashanah patur. If you ate leaves from a reed, or the leaves from grapevine, right? Grape leaves, sheliv levu kodem Rosh Hashanah, that had grown, like had become leaves before Rosh Hashanah, then you're patur. The eitz ba'almanim, they're just like a piece of wood. In other words, those are leaves that are so fully grown, they're in this category of food that's not fit to eat. It's an achilah she'ena ru'uya. Nobody eats those. Those are not things that people eat. If they became leaves, or it's like, so they're like fresh leaves, they're small fresh leaves that grew since Rosh Hashanah, right? So sometime in the previous 10 days. Adayin rakim he, they're still soft, the chashidei ocha, and they are considered to be food. Kas pilpelin o zangila yeveshta, right? So if you chewed on peppers, or you chewed on dry ginger, then that's patur. they're patur from punishment. That's not considered to be eating. They're not fit for eating. The imrituvim, but if they're moist, in other words, they're not dried, right? So we said if it's dried peppers or dried ginger, that's not really food, and that's like eating eitz ba'alma also. It's like eating, a piece of wood or something. But if they're moist, then you're chayav, because they are fit for eating. V'had ba'in and shiur, dafka l'chayev karet or chatat. This idea that you need to eat a certain amount in order to be chayav, you need to eat a kotev hagasa. We only say that for the purpose of designating that technically you're chayav karet if you eat that much, or you would be chayav chatat if you ate it b'shogeg. About isura ika b'chol shivur, it's forbidden to eat even the smallest amount. And of course, that was this first sugya about chatzi shiur, and so he holds clearly that chatzi shiur is asur, and he doesn't define whether it's asur midioraita or asur midrabanan, because in a sense it doesn't matter. But we saw poskim hold like Rabbi Yochanan that chatzi shiur is asur min Torah. Achal midavar she'eno ra'ui la'achila. If you ate out something that's not fit to eat, katav aviha ezri, the fil isura leka. If you did eat food that's not fit to eat, the aviha ezri holds that there's not even any isur for that. And the Prisha here says, Prisha is one of the Perushim on the Torah. Perush b'delo achal k'shiur. The Aviha Ezri, in other words, he says we understand the Aviha Ezri to say that there's no Isser in eating food that's not fit to eat. That's if you did not eat a shiur, well, k'shiur patur aval asur. If you did eat a shiur, you're exempt from punishment, but it's still forbidden. Kemashkin, like drinking something that's not fit to drink, to the kaman sopa siman that we'll talk about later in the siman. Or inami dami the mashkin, or else maybe it's not like mashkin. The kaman shem ru'uyim v'nechalim ha'yidei tzibul, because they are fit to be eaten with food. In other words, we'll talk about mashkin later. We saw in the Mishnah, tsirum or yas, right, brine or the fishy, gooey stuff that I can't think of the word. Yeah, when you have, the sort of fatty, gooey stuff that comes with preserved fish. So you do eat that. So it's not. Those are mashkin that are not ru'uyin to eat them by themselves. But you do. They are ru'uyin to eat with the food that you normally eat them with. Right? So arguably there's a difference between ochel that's not ra'ui to eat and mashkin that are not ra'ui to drink, because a lot of the mashkin that are not ra'ui to drink are things that we do eat, whereas food that's not fit to eat, we never eat it. It's not eaten at all. But in any event, it's a fine difference. It's still asur, venkach uvenkach, except according to the Aviha Ezri, if you eat less than a shiur of ochlim that are not ra'ui to eat, then technically it's not asur. Shtiya, right? So drinking that we mentioned the previous siman. What is that? And we learn in the Mishnah, Shotem elo lugma b'yom kippurim chayav, u'sharin b'chol adam l'fi mashu. So, right, drinking a cheekful on Yom Kippur someone is chayav for that, and we measure that each person according to the way they are. V'lo mulug mamash, not truly his cheeks full. El kamalod mulug mav, rather like mulog mav. Perush, and what does that mean? Kolshi is salkenu v'tzadefad b'fiv, right? As much as you can put into one side of your mouth. So basically one cheekful. But it'll look like a whole, like both of his cheeks. I think what it means is, as a practical matter, what you do, right? You drink a certain amount, when it sits in your face, when you're looking at your face, it sits in your mouth, your cheeks will protrude, but the way we measure it is just to push everything we can off to one side. Because technically, right, the term mav, it's a plural, right? It's his cheeks, but the halachic term is kim lo mav. It's like his cheeks full, but the way we measure it is by one cheek. This is actually less than a revis in an average person. All different kinds of drinks are mitzaref to one shiur. So if you drank some soda and some wine and some whiskey and I don't know what else, some milk, well, you're dead. This sounds terrible already.
Yeah.
So, right, then they're all mitzaref. And the amount of time that you would need to drink from the beginning to the end in order that all that you drank combines to make a single shiur is the time it would normally take you to drink a revi'it, which is a quarter of a lug. Arrived katav the shiur tziru shtiyahu b'dei afilat pras k'det kamos tziru v'afilat. Arrived held that the shiur for drinking, the time shiur for drinking to be mitzaref is actually the same as the time for eating, which is k'dei afilat pras, and we'll see later on in Achronim how they deal with that. Shata mashkin shenan ru'im l'shtiyah. So now this is where he talks about these mashkin that are not fit to drink, kigon tzira moryas v'chomets, right? These things that people don't actually drink unto themselves, but you do eat them. You consume them along with food that you're eating. V'chomets chai, right? Raw vinegar. Patura v'lasur. So if you drink those, you're exempt from punishment, but it's still forbidden. V'chomets mazug chayav. If you drink diluted vinegar, you're chayav, right? Because people do drink diluted vinegar. At least is one way of understanding it. But if it's just the vinegar itself, then no. Okay, so this is the tour. And let's see how the Shulchan Aruch paskins on all of these things. Right? He's going to say almost exactly the same things as the tour, but it's going to be a little bit different, and we'll have the Hagot of the Ramad. So 1 second. For this, we can look at it here with the Mishnah Berurah. Actually. All right, let's see how it goes. My hesitation here is I'm not sure if I should use the Mishnah Berurah here on Al HaTorah or the Mishnah Berurah from the Bar Ilan. And I'll tell you why, because the Mishnah Berurah on Al HaTorah, I thought it would be easier because it's side by side.
Yeah,
The downside is, in a regular Mishnah Berurah, the comments of the Mishnah Berurah are numbered, right, with Hebrew letters. It's easy to go from whatever it says in the Shulchan Aruch to the Mishnah Berurah. In the way they have it here, you have to basically find the reference yourself. So we'll see. Whereas if we do it in the, if we do it here, you see, I can click on this and it'll bring up the Mishnah Berurah on that particular comment. All right, we'll see how it goes. I wasn't, that's one of the reasons I like to make these sheets in advance, because then I get to control all of that. All right, but we'll see how it goes. So, Yoma Kippurim Ketosevet Hagasa Chayav. V'hu pachot mikabetza ma'at. It's a little less than a kabetza. V'shiur zeh shaveh l'chol adam bein lenanas bein la'og melech bashan. This shiur is the same for every person, whether they're a dwarf or whether they're Og, the king of Bashan, right, who was a giant. So let's see how the Mishnah Berurah comments on this. Kikotevet Hagasa, Afal Gav, the Bechol Isurei HaTorah Misha'arinan B'Kazayit, even though for all other Isurei Torah, we measure with the measure of the Kazayit. Kol Zahechi Dechtive Achila. We only do that in all these places where the Torah talks about eating. It specifically talks about achila. Masha'en came the Yoma Kippurim, that which is not the case on Yom Kippur, the lo k'tiv achila. And this is something we, we mentioned many, many times, even though it seems obvious to us that you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippurim. The Torah doesn't say that you're not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. It doesn't use that language of achila. Ela manah katuv achila b'lashon inui. The Torah prevents you from eating on Yom Kippur using the language of inui, and not of achila. Right? It doesn't say lo tochal. It says ta'anu. K'dichtiv hanefesh asher lo ti'uneh. Right? The Torah says, like the people, the person who doesn't make themselves afflict themselves on Yom Kippur is chayav. V'kim lahu l'chachamim. The chachamim knew, right? Literally, it was established to the chachamim. Pachot mikechotevet lo miyatva da'ate klal. Less than kechotevet is not miyashev da'at. It doesn't put one at ease if you're hungry. Baharehu ra'ev, and if he eats less than that, he'll be hungry. And he will be afflicted kivat chila, the way he was to begin with. Vayen beur halacha. Look at the beur halacha. So let's look at the beur halacha. See what he says. Right. So, I take it you've learned Mishnah Berurah before, right?
no, not really. Just
Oh,
not
okay.
really. Yes, I didn't understand what's the biur halacha.
Okay, so I'll explain, but let me just think. Should have prepared this beforehand, but I want to make it clear. So give me a second. I don't think I have this downloaded. I want to show you a page of the Mishnah Brura, so you'll understand what's going on. A standard Mishnah Brura. They have much nicer editions nowadays. But this is actually, I have a actually, maybe this is one of the new editions. That would be nice. In the last few years, there's been, I think, more than one new edition of the Mishnah Brura. Yeah, this is one of the new editions, so that's nice. It'll be easier for us. Just a second. Right, hold on a second. To ink file. We'll look at our siman, and we can see exactly the way it looks. First of all, though, I'll just tell you something. Whenever you come across a new sefer, and if it's new for you, you can learn a lot by reading the sha'ar, right? The frontispiece, the first page. So it'll tell you the name of the book and who wrote it. And in these kinds of svarim, it tells you more because, right, the kinds of svarim that we have usually have or often will have perushim and other kinds of addenda that were written by different people. So here it tells us right on the first page, Sefer Mishnah Brura, V'hu perush yafeh u'menupeh al Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. It's a nice and refined perush on the Shulchan Aruch of the Orach Chaim. This is the 6th chelek. The Mishnah Brura in its original publication was 6 volumes. And this includes Hilchos Yom Tov, Chol HaMoed, Ta'aniyot, Yamim Noraim, Sukkot, Chanukah, Purim, Asher Chiber Harav HaGaon, Yosef Karo, in Chidushei Dinim Sheishmit HaGaon Hanal V'Himtziyam, HaGaon Moreno Harav Moshe Yisur. So it has the Shulchan Aruch, right? The Shulchan Aruch, which was written by Yosef Karo, and it has some dinim that were left out by Yosef Karo, and they were put in by Moshe Yisur. Im nosei kleihem hema, hello hema, with the nosei kilim. So, are you familiar with the term nosei kilim?
Yeah.
So this is a kind of a literary term. A nosei kelim in a biblical sense was a squire. It was the person literally who carried the like the weapons for their master when they went to battle. He was a nosei kelim, and literally it means the people who wrote commentaries or addenda to other people's halachic works. They're called the nosei kelim. So all of the perushim on the Shulchan Aruch are the nosei kelim, and I would say all the perushim on the Rambam that you see in a standard Rambam, they're the nosei kelim. They're the people who are carrying the accoutrement of the So it's a very nice kind of literary reference, that meaning they're there in principle, they're there in support. Even though there are cases where the Nosei Kelim are actually in competition in some way with the author. But for the most part, this is true. And here, this is also true. With Moshe Isserlis and the Ramah, right, the Raman and Yosef Karo, so Moshe Isserlis was really adding addenda to the Shulchan Aruch to bring it in line with the Piskei Dinim and Minhagim of Ashkenazim. And he didn't hold entirely by the methodology that Yosef Karo used to paskin, which was weighted toward Sephardi poskin. And that's why also, like many of the Sephardim and Edota Mizrach hold like the Shulchan Aruch and not like the Ramah,
Right.
right? And we, and Ashkenazim generally hold like the Ramah. But the Nosei Kelim on the Shulchan Aruch in this edition, that are being brought in this edition, are the Be'er HaGolah, Mehagaon Morena Harav Moshe Ravkish. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Vilna, the Be'er HaGolah, we'll see in the top corners of each page. Those are the references for the sources of the Shulchan Aruch, right? Because the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring sources. The Shulchan Aruch, Yosef Karo relied on his work, the Beit Yosef, where all of the sources are brought, right? And so the Be'er HaGolah doesn't bring the whole discussion, but he just cites the sources that the Shulchan Aruch is based on. The Be'er Hetev from Yehuda Ashkenazi, and the Be'er Hetev was kind of a forerunner. I mean, now we would say it's kind of a forerunner to the Mishnah Brura. The Be'er Hetev is mostly a summary of a couple or more of the major Nosei Kelim of the Shulchan Aruch. One time, on another occasion, we'll look at a standard Shulchan Aruch with all the Perushim, and we'll see what I mean. But the Be'er Hetev sought to essentially just take the main halachic conclusions from the Achronim, from the Nosei Kelim that wrote on the Shulchan Aruch, and made a little commentary. And also the Sharei Tshuva from Chaim Mordechai Margoliot. The Sharei Tshuva is a cross-reference to relevant tshuvot to different sifim on the Shulchan Aruch. So it's discussion in Achronim in their Shelot Tshuvot that he hooked up, directly to the relevant passage in the Shulchan Aruch. It's very it's a very helpful reference. And of course, all of these were done way before computers and computer indexing, right? So nowadays we have all kinds of computer aids.
Yeah.
To help us with all these things, like, this was one of the whole points of the Bar Ilan project, was to digitize as many Shelot Tshuvot as possible. And the reference, like there are ways of linking, like I can't think of the word. There are helpful things inside of the Bar Ilan project. On any given seif in the Shulchan Aruch to link you up to relevant shuvot. But hundreds of years before the Bar Ilan project, we had the Sharei Tshuva. And then we come to the main thing. The main thing for this edition is the Mishnah Brura, right? So, Be'uri, my commentaries, Krati B'Shem Mishnah Brura. I called it the Mishnah Brura. Yan, because Kimitocho Mitbarer Divrei HaShulchan Aruch Kol Din V'Din V'Ta'amo V'Nimukol Miknoral Poskim V'lo Yeh K'Sefer HaChatum. Right. So I brought it in order to clarify each din of the Shulchan Aruch with its reason and its reasoning from the Gemara and from Poskim. So it won't be like a sealed book, right? So it'll be more of an open book. וגם יקובץ בו כל הדינים וההלכות והבארים המפוזרים בספרי האחרונים מפרשי השולחן ערוך המפורסמים. He's also going to gather up halachas and explanations that are scattered in the books of the Achronim who explain the Shulchan Aruch, the famous poskim who explain the Shulchan Aruch. And he brings, for example, the Ilya Rabbah, Primegadim, Birkei Yosef, Mamar Mordechai, Verabot Kahina. The Ilya Rabbah was actually a commentary on the Levush, which was, a Sefer Halacha that was written like the Shulchan Aruch a generation later, but nonetheless. And the Pri Megadim, all of these things, Bihi's Damnut. Now that I think about it, we should do this. Maybe I'll do it next week. I'll prepare it. I'll show you a standard Shulchan Aruch, and then you'll see a lot of what he's talking about. Asher hayu harbe mehem acharei habe'er heitev. Many of these came after the Be'er Heitev, right? So here he himself is acknowledging the Be'er Heitev as having done a similar work, right? This is what the Be'er Heitev that we mentioned earlier that's printed, right? But they weren't brought in the Sharei Tshuva, ki im ma'at mize'er. Only a tiny bit was brought in the Sharei Tshuva, based on the Kamot here and there. All of these I'm bringing together here, but right, with a clear and easy language, and in a good, in a proper order. And so that's the Mishnah Brura. And Sirachti B'Tzido, I also added to the side Kama Inyanim Nechutzim, some other very important points of B'Shem Beur Halacha. It's going to be called the Beur Halacha, Ukashmo Kenhu. As it's named, so it is. Kibo Bi'arti Kama Pamim Divrei Halacha Muva B'Kitzur B'Toch HaMishnah Brura B'li Raya Upo Hereti Bezrat Hashem Yitbarach Et Mekoro La'ayin Kol Migmara La'ayin Kol Migmara Poskim. In other words, I'm going to use the Beur Halacha to explain in greater depth halachot that I paskened in the Mishnah Brura, but I'll go into depth and I'll show you he's going to show the reasoning and the sources in the Beur Halacha. Sometimes I'm going to use it just to explain the Shulchan Aruch in greater length, in places where it needs to be explained. גם תחת המשנה ברורה הנ"ל, פתחתי שער רחב עם פרחים וציצים מצוינים, ושמו נאלו שער הציון. So I'm going to put at the bottom of the Mishnah Brura this a gate with, flowers and blossoms that are, beautiful, that are like beautiful coming up flowers. And its name is nice for it. It's called the Shar Hatzion. Kibo Yitzu, right? So it's Shar Hatzion or Shar Hatziyun, right? It's the Shar of bringing reference. Kibo Yitzuyan al kol dibur v'dibur ledat mibeten mi yatsu mibeten mi yatsu hapninim ha'elu. In other words, right? So to know, where it's that brings the immediate sources. So we'll see this in the Mishnah Berurah. He'll say a psak. And then very often he'll use the Shar Hatzion to tell you which particular posek or poskim he's basing his psak on. So so he wrote his own cross references. Like, so the Be'er HaGolah, as we said, is going to show us the cross references, the basis for the Shulchan Aruch. The Mishnah Berurah just did this all himself. So he wrote the Mishnah Berurah. He wrote an expansion on particular halachot in the Beur Halacha, and he writes his references in the Shar Hatzion. Kol eila chibarti b'ezrat Hashem b'bracha chonen d'amdan Yisrael Meir Reb Aryeh Zeva Kohen Meir Rodin, etc. So this is the Mishnah Berurah, and if you have a Mishnah Berurah. So this is the 6th volume, but it has his Hakdamah, which we're not going to look at, but Hakdamot are always interesting to look at. Also here, a lot of times by now, so this is a relatively late in book publishing, but at the beginning of the volume, he gives you a right? He lays out what acronyms he's using in case you get stuck on them, because they use a lot of acronyms. And here is the table of contents. And then we have the Mishnah Berurah. So I'm going to skip down and try to find the, maybe overshot it a little bit. Let's see. It's the one. Here we go. That's not bad. So let's look here and see how it looks inside. We can use this. So here's the Shulchan Aruch, right? This is from the previous Siman, but in a standard Shulchan Aruch and all the editions of this, all standard editions of the Shulchan Aruch, the text of the Shulchan Aruch is in regular block letters, and the text of the Ramah is in Rashi script, and it's introduced by the word Haggah, like comment. Right. And on the page, so here you have Ochel B'Yom Kippurim. So of course the first Aleph is for the Sif, it's Sif Aleph. The teeny Aleph that's here is the Be'er HaGolah. So Ochel B'Yom Kippurim Kekotavet HaGasa. So if you look at the Be'er HaGolah, it says Mishnah Yoma Ayin Gimel. Right, so that's the Mishnah, and it doesn't say Amud Aleph, Amud Bet, but you can figure that out. That's the Be'er HaGolah. And then we have the different references. So the regular block letters that are in round parentheses, those are for the Mishnah Berurah. The asterisk refers you to the Be'er Halacha, which is what we're going to look at. The Rashi Aleph Bet in brackets refers you to the Sharei Tshuva, and the There's actually no Be'er Heitev. This is from the previous Siman. But the Be'er Heitev is Rashi script in round parentheses. Okay. So that's what we're looking at. So let's look at now, after all this, it's actually going to be easier for us to follow the Beur Halakha using the larger digital version. But this is where it is. This is how it's laid out. It's in Rashi script on the same page, in a smaller font, and down here is the Shar HaTziyar. So it's quite an amazing work. The Mishnah Berurah didn't invent this. There were other people who did this before the Mishnah Berurah, where people, in a sense, kind of imitated the what happened over generations with other works, like like the Gemara, right? So you have the Gemara, and then you have Rashi, but then you also have Tosfos, and then after the time of printing, then you start to get these, like the English Batner Mitzvah and the little cross references, and so you see that the Mishnah Berurah, he understood they're valuable things. They're all valuable things. So for his work, he basically did, like the Rashi. The Mishnah Berurah is like Rashi, and the Beur Halakha is something like Tosfos, even though it's not the same, but it's in that realm. So that's our little introduction to the Mishnah Berurah. I'm glad we did that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, good. Glad we did that. So let's take a minute now in the last few minutes. Let's just look at this this Beur Halakha. But I'm going to do it from Bar Ilan, just because it'll be easier to see it on the screen. And it's also an interesting phenomenon now that everything's getting digitized. Soon you won't have to learn Rashi script to be able to read books. Did I show you this? There's a company that makes these novelty T-shirts and mugs in Israel that are directed toward the religious community, people who either are religious or who grew up religious. So there's this great mug. I got this from my kids, and if I have a minute later, I'll show you, or I'll try to send you a picture. It's printed in Rashi script. It's a mug. It's printed in Rashi script. And it's printed out like the way an eye chart is printed out. It starts like with larger letters, and then each subsequent thing is smaller letters. And it says, I'll just tell you what it says in English. It says, if you can read this, this is a sign that you're a DOS. And it's completely brilliant. It's in Rashi script. So it's completely brilliant, because yes, if you weren't brought up in a religious environment, Israelis who don't have any kind of religious background generally have no idea how to read Rashi script. It's like another language to them. So if you and I got one of these for each of my kids. And they have, each of them has anyway, we know a lot of people who weren't brought up religious, and everybody gets a kick out of this. It's very cute. Anyway, so let's see what he says in the Beur Halakha about Kikotev Hagasa, because the truth is, you see in the Mishnah Berurah at the beginning of the Siman, he gave us already kind of a nice introduction to this idea of what's going on with eating on Yom Kippur, and he explains that the shiur, right? So what did he tell us? That the shiur for Achila normally is Kazayit. It's different on Yom Kippur because the Torah doesn't the Torah doesn't say you don't eat, but it says you should be, right? You're mitaneh on Yom Kippur, so it has a different implication. So here in the Biur Halacha it says Kikotevet Hagasa Mitbaer B'Shas. It's explained in the Gemara. The Kikotevet Hainu Im Garinatan. Right? It's the size of the Kotevet with its pit. L'chora di Machal Kotevet Atzma Patur. So it would seem then that if you actually ate just the dates of just the Kotevet, you would be exempt. Shareb chaser makom garin. Right, so if you had an actual fat date, you would remove the pit and then eat it. That wouldn't be a shiur. Bagarin batzmo ein letzarfo, and even if you ate it with the pit, you still wouldn't add that to the shiur. Shaharei kashehu ve'ein ra'ui klal achilat adam. Right, because it's a hard pit and it's not. It falls into this category of not being fit for consumption. And according to this, even if you swallowed the kotevet with its pit together, the chara ain't no moil, it wouldn't help. In other words, it wouldn't help to make you chayav. Afal gav de malyuta bulinyan bracha ayin siman reshu, right? Even though it's effective for regarding the bracha, and that's a separate issue. And it tells you look in siman reshut in the Mishnah Berurah, samach kuf zayin is seif katan zayin, right? So in the Shulchan Aruch we have simanim, right? Each chapter is a siman. Each halacha is called a seif. Right, and then each comment of whatever commentator, let's say the Mishnah Berurah, is on any given part of the Shulchan Aruch is a seif katan. It's the secondary seif. Shaharei ba'inan tu vedate, because the whole point of eating, which he defined already in the Mishnah Berurah, is to be miyashev dat. It's to put your mind at ease when you're hungry. But sir mishiur lo miyat vedate. Less than a shiur doesn't put your mind at ease. V'chein matzati l'ma'amar Mordechai, and I saw this also in the Ma'amar Mordechai. In other words, this idea that if you ate an actual kotevet, even if you ate it with the pit, you still wouldn't be chayav per se, even though it would be asur. And he wrote to sort of the Gam to in this context, like to sort of hesitate to like equivocate about the way the Bach, right? So the Bach is the Bayit Chadash. And the Bayit Chadash was one of the other major commentators on the tour. The Mashmamine Behefek, because from the Bach it sounds like the opposite, that you would be chayav for eating a kikotevet. Ela de'eno miyushav lefi zeh k'tzat, but it's just that this doesn't work out according to this a little bit. Because the Tana used this language for a shiur of eating on Yom Kippurim. He used the language of kikotevet. The kotevet atzma eina bichlal. Right. So in other words, the language, it doesn't. The Tana doesn't say ha'ochel kotevet hagasa. He says kikotevet hagasa. So the implication is that the Tana is already telling me by using that type of language that he's not talking about eating an actual date. He's just giving you a size. It's kikotevet hagasa. The kotevet atzma eina bichlal. The kotevet itself is not actually included in that. Nonetheless, achar kach matzati b'Shabbat sof perak notel. At the end of perak notel, right? You know this idea, and you know because you were in Mishnah that we designate prakim, sometimes we'll say like Perek Shishi or whatever it is, but more often than not, in Rishonim and Achronim, they will designate prakim in Shas by the name of the parak. And the parak is named usually after the first word or words. So in Shabbos, at the end of Parak Notel, in the Rif, Sham, Beferush Kama, in his first comment, Diyesh Tmarim Rakim, there are moist dates, Shene'achalim im hagarinim. There are such things as moist dates that are normally eaten with their pits. In other words, because the pit is not yet hardened. V'hainu afilu adam, even people eat them, not just animals. But nonetheless, in words, if you look there in the Rif where he talks about this, he has two perushim, and one is it'll come out that sometimes there are dates that people eat whole, including the pit, but he says in the second perush, it would only be animals that eat it. Vayem beperek Yud Aleph the Trunot, beperusha Mishnah HaRambam b'Mishnah Hey, v'tzarich yiyun. And you can also look in the 11th chapter of Trunot in the Rambam's Perush on Mishnah Hey, and this needs yiyun, right? This needs further research. So he leaves this as a kind of a question. So you understand now, he put this whole thing in the Be'ur Halacha because it's not immediately important for us to know this. It's an important theoretical discussion. That is, when we say Kekotevet Hagasa, so what if you eat an actual date? Did you eat enough to be chayav, or is that as an actual date less than the chiyuv? Because Kikotevet Hagasa is referring to the volume of the date, including its pit. But in reality, if you ate that Kikotevet with the pit, then it would be less than the shiur, because we don't count the pit, or maybe we do. And this is sort of the back and forth that he's presenting here. So when we, to the extent that we'll learn the Mishnah Brura, we will sometimes look at the Be'ur Halacha, but not always. Like now, in order to understand this better, we should now go and look at these references. We should look at the Rif in Shabbos. We should look at the Rambam's Perush and Trunot, and then we'll understand it better. But he's laid out his basic argument. And he doesn't come to a hard, fast conclusion. He leaves it with tzarich yiyun. Tzarich yiyun means, right, this needs further explication, needs further research. And so he doesn't paskin per se. And it's also, as I say, as a practical matter, it doesn't matter that much in reality, because we're not likely to have this as an issue. But it's important to know on a theoretical basis. So maybe this is a good place to stop. I think so. Next time, I want to continue in the Mishnah Brura, and I want to also then contrast that with the Aruch HaShulchan. And then after that, I decided to skip basically more Rishonim between, we looked at the Rif and the Ran. I was going to look at the Rosh and some other ones. So I thought, no, we'll do the tour. We'll skip the Beis Yosef. We'll skip all that. We'll look at the Mishnah Brura, and I can try to make that a little bit more organized. But I think it's good for us. And then here and there, we'll look at some other Rishonim, and I think it's more relevant. So that's it for today.
Okay, thank you. That was great. It was very nice. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good Shabbos.
Thanks, you too. Good night.
Bye-bye.